welcome to Emily Kate Made This. I am Emily Kate and I'm coming to you from Berlin in Germany. Welcome to my Everything I Made in 2024 video. Take two. I decided to just give up on the original footage that I filmed back at the very end of December because I just went on and on and on. So, take two. I think I'm going to record this in two sections, maybe three. I already don't have much battery because somebody forgot to turn off the camera, so I wiped the battery completely just as I was about to record. I noticed this. So, yeah. So welcome to my Everything I Made in 2024 video. I know this isn't everybody's cup of tea, but I personally really enjoy these kind of videos, especially if I only recently found the person and maybe I haven't binge watched everything they've made in that year. So now I can get a little glimpse into what they made and I can look back at their previous videos. So I like these kind of videos. Hopefully you do too, otherwise you probably wouldn't have clicked into the video. I have my book of notes of everything I knitted in and everything I brought in, and everything I knitted out. So let us begin. I think I'll do a little tally chart somewhere on the side of grams out. Don't think I'll do grams in, grams out, so how much everything weighed and how much I knitted out by the end of the year. Hopefully you understand that I'm not going to go into great details about every single item, because if I spent even 2 minutes talking about each item, we'd be here for over 70 minutes. And I've definitely already spoken for longer than 2 minutes, so it will be a flash image. I've got them all laid out, most of them, if I have them here in the apartment. I have most things laid out next to me, so I'll show it to you. If I have a photo still or a video, I'll try and pop it in. But it's mostly just to show you everything I made, and if you are interested in something specific, you can easily go back through my previous videos because you'll know that I'm in the thumbnail, it'll be there, or if I say I made this in May, you can have a look at the videos I made in May. Typically I only do 1 or 2 videos a month, so it shouldn't be too hard. So, January, I knitted 2 things. Two things. One I love, one is... The thing I love, almost one of the favourite things I've ever made, is my Swedish bonnet. I love this bonnet. And this was a vintage pattern that I discovered somewhere via Instagram that was a pattern from a random website. I'll try and link it below, otherwise it'll be linked in the video that I talked about making this. It's so warm. I wear this throughout winter. I took it to Sweden. It keeps my ears nice and toasty, and I have plans to make another Swedish bonnet. Not the same style, similar, but not the same. And I could have 10 bonnets and I would be a happy woman. Love them. The actual pattern somebody uploaded onto a Swedish website with random patterns from miscellaneous decades really, kind of 90s, early 2000s, 80s. So I don't know the exact date that this was, but it was called something like Grandma's Bonnet, or Bonnets of Grandma's Time, something like that. And I think a lot of people wore these in the 40s, maybe 30s. This one is, I'm pretty sure, knitted in Swedish wool, and it was some leftovers from a project that I had made, and yes, I love it. The next finished object, I don't know if it really counts. It went wrong. I was all enthusiastic. These are supposed to be ankle warmers to go into above my boots, but they didn't really work out that well. I used some fluffy alpaca yarn that I had as scraps, and all of it pokes through, all the fluff pokes through this beige colour. Typically that wouldn't happen when I do a lot of colour work, and that doesn't happen, but because it's so fluffy, it's just the fluff that sticks through. And to be honest, they don't look great, and I don't really know what to do with them. I could try donating them, but I don't know where to. And I could rip it out, but I don't know what I would do with it. So at the moment it's just sitting in my wardrobe, waiting for the day that I want to deal with it. February, I attempted to make some thrummed mittens, and they were a total disaster, but not if you think how marvellous the end result was, because I was showing them to you in February and somebody said it looks like a cactus, and when I looked at it I thought it is a perfect cactus. So I put it in a plant pot, and it is now decoration in my bathroom, and I love it. I have no intention of making thrummed mittens again anytime soon. It was tedious and I did not do a very good job, but the cactus looked great. I also achieved another success in February, and that was my Bows Are News jumper. I love this jumper. This is one of my favourite vintage jumpers. It's a 1940s pattern, and I used Drops Nord for this. Love it, love it. It's an alpaca wool nylon mix. It's really soft. I really love how it knits up. The only thing I remember having issues with was that I didn't buy enough yarn, and when the new blue yarn came, I was using my wooden licker needles and they stained them blue. The yarn was so sticky, like the yarn, there was so much dye in the yarn still that it turned my needles blue, my hands blue. It's weird because I've used this yarn quite a lot and I've never had that issue. It was just 2 new balls that I ordered to finish this project. So that part wasn't fun, but the jumper is. I always have dreams of making different colour variations of this jumper, but honestly I don't need that many jumpers and I don't need that many of the same jumper, but when I look at it I just think I could make this in this colour, I could make it in cream and make rainbow bows, and the inspiration that this jumper gives me. I believe I changed the pattern slightly. I changed the sleeves to be a small box pleat. You can't really see it, but I typically do change most things in vintage knitwear. I don't follow the patterns 100%. I use my own gauge and my own measurements to adjust it to how I like. I just take the main event that's happening on the jumper, and often the sleeves don't fit me or the sleeve heads don't fit me in the original patterns, so I choose my own. And my gauge is always different because I typically use sport weight yarn and the original knitting patterns use a thinner yarn. So I changed the gauge. So yes, that is my first vintage jumper of the year. Then I picked up an oldie but a goldie. If you've been here, I would say the last 2 years, but it could be 3, since I've been getting into my vintage knitting, I started off quite early with a Chevron Jumper, and lots of disasters occurred due to gauge and not understanding how to make vintage jumpers fit me. I had quite a few issues with Chevron, but since then I have made 3, adjusted them, and I went to the original and pulled it apart and re-knitted it. I don't remember the details, so you will have to look at the video for it, but there are several videos about this jumper on my channel. Sometimes I feel very embarrassed that if anyone watches my YouTube and these are the first videos they come across, they'll just think I'm a total idiot. But to be honest, this is my reality. I really did struggle to get this vintage knitting pattern to work, and I was determined that I was going to get this jumper, and I did not want to rip everything out. So I know that the original one, when I made this, I made the sleeves way too big, and I ended up using those sleeves and turning them into an entirely different jumper of their own, because the sleeves were that big that they could be the entire front panel of a jumper. So I believe what I did is, this was massive. This body was massive. So I took out a couple of these repeats and cut them out and sewed the rest of it together. So it's like it's knitted flat, but not to the original pattern. So I think I took out maybe 4 of these chevrons altogether. So one on that side, one on that side, one on that side, one on that side. Then I sewed them together. I know that this part is still a bit too big, it's a bit too wide, because I kept thinking that the distance here that I needed was 3 inches. It's actually 2, so that's why all my measurements were wrong, because I based it off of incorrect body measurements. So that was also my fault. I have worn this a few times, but I don't typically gravitate towards this one because I still want to fix it. I did add some ribbon to try and bring up the shoulders because they were drooping, but I don't think it really did anything. But it's a work in progress. I still wear it, I still love it. I'm really proud of myself for all the changes that I managed to do and still to save it. And I know that this jumper has inspired many chevrons to come to life in the world, so that makes me very happy. So it has lived an excellent life already, and I will wear it. I think I will wear it today or tomorrow, just because I haven't given it the love it deserves. Little tea break, and then we'll move on to March. Okay, so March, I made a jumper very similar to the shape of this one. This is, I don't know what you would call it, like a cap sleeve or a drop sleeve tee. It's 1950s. And I wanted to make a stripy tee that looked like this. So, oh, it's been folded. You may notice a huge crease. Ignore that. So to my memory, my mother knitted the rib, I think. My mum did the rib, then I knitted the rest of this by hand, and it's a very nice tee. I wear this a lot, but usually on holiday. I mentioned this in my last video that I posted last week, I think, that this typically becomes my holiday t-shirt because it goes really well with a certain dress. It's a really nice warm base layer that you don't get too hot, but it keeps you from being chilly. And it goes nicely with cardigans and jumpers. Yep, big fan of this one. And this ended up becoming part of a twin set, but I will show you that when I get to that twin set piece. Words. I don't think anything else got knitted out in March. Nope. That's what I knitted in March. Then in April, I knitted out my forest berry tee. Not tee, forest berry cardigan. Although a forest berry t-shirt sounds delightful. I might have to do that. Anyway, I also showed you this one in my latest video that just went up. This is one of my favourite cardigans. Love this cardigan. Love the colour. Love the design. This is Fable Knitwear. and the yarn is Campus 2-ply. I bought in Stockholm. Sorry, I am speeding through because I only just recently talked about this in more detail and there's an entire video on it. So I'll never get through if I don't speed myself up. Highly, highly, highly recommend this pattern if you are looking for a cardigan or if you've been humming and hawing about Fable Knitwear's pattern. Get it, knit it, love it. Now I want to make a tee. So is that April? Did I knit anything else out? Nope, that was April. Then May out, I can only show you one. The month of May was a sock month for me. I made my mum some cat socks. Hopefully there's a photo. And I made myself some egg socks. These are technically, they are stone knits, but I merged two of her patterns together due to an utter dislike for 3 colours in a row or in a round in small circumference knitting. So I love the pattern so much. I wish that I could have a pair of socks all the way to the toe like this, but the enjoyment factor was 0, so that's probably not going to happen unless I can somehow start knitting with my right hand English style again. But I merged 2 of her patterns. She has an adorable chicken pattern sock that has chickens at the top and then on the foot a fried egg. So I took this section from the chicken pattern and this one from the breakfast set. The yarn is Keats Garn. It was a one-of-a-kind, beautiful blue yarn, hand-dyed, and I think these are just the Arvetta Classic Filcolana colours. This can be, the pattern can be in fried egg, boiled egg versions or avocados. I really want to make the avocado version, and I'm considering whether that will ever happen because I used to knit with my right hand as an English style knitter and I loved those small circumference 9-inch circulars because you could just go round and round and it was great, but I got way more hand pain in my hands when I knitted English style, which is why I changed over to knitting with my left hand. But holding those tiny needles with my left in order to knit, I can't get the same angle that I need. So I ended up going back to Magic Loop, which I used to get huge ladders because I could not get the tension right when I was swapping the needles. And I noticed that a lot in one of my jumpers that I mentioned. I don't know when I talked about it. It was very recent I talked about it. It was my Christmas or festive bunny ears jumper, and all the way up the arm you see this huge seam, and that is what made me start looking for alternative ways to knit colourwork with Magic Loop. So now I do a different system where when I move my needle out to go around, I bring the colours with me. So I bring maybe 3 or 4 or 6 depending how many colours are there. I bring those along with me so you don't get this big gap down the side. I probably didn't explain that very well, but I don't know what it's called. I have mentioned it before actually. If that didn't make any sense but you want to know what I'm talking about, the video where I made my mum's cat socks in May, I did that technique there, and I think I talked about it more clearly there, so have a look there. And I linked a video. Yes, so that is the story of how I ended up knitting these socks like this. The other socks I made are my bunny ear rainbow socks, but I'm wearing them right now, so I was looking for them just before recording this, then realised I'm wearing them. So straight off the foot, These are one of my favourite socks I've ever made. I love these. This is a vintage 1940s pattern. Also the same pattern I was just referring to about the sleeves. Love this pattern. And just a quick going off topic mildly. When I recorded that video talking about my bunny ear jumper, I was saying that it didn't really bother me about the sleeves looking so terrible. When I watched that footage back when I was editing, I thought, you know what, that really bothers me. It really bothers me, and I don't like the shoulders at all. I'm thinking I'm just going to rip that jumper out. I'm going to rip the sleeves out. I'm going to rip the top half of that jumper out, and I'm going to redo it. Because I've improved in my knitting since then. I've improved in my vintage knitting, like using my measurements and my gauge to get the fit that I want. I understand it better. I understand this magic loop better. I might just rip it out and make it look 100 times better than the monstrosity that goes on those arms. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know which video it was, but definitely one in December and definitely one in the December before, probably also January, this kind of video in January last year, because I would have made it the year before. Okay. June. Are we in June? Yes, June in, June out. June. I got my... In May, I think it was May, I got my vintage knitting machine from 1956. I love my knitting machine, and I wanted to learn a few things. I don't think I wrote it down. I knit a headscarf as my first practice on my knitting machine. It was using this yarn, but it isn't this. It was the same yarn, I think. And that was so that when I put my hair up in curlers, I can tie the 1940s style headband thing. It came out too small because I didn't understand gauge at all on the machine, but it does do the job that I wanted, so it's fine. So I knitted that out. Then I knitted cotton tee using various cotton, I always want to call them scraps, but they're not scraps because they were just already small little minis. My mum gave them to me when I started to knit as a Christmas present, and I never turned them into anything because I wanted them to be like a special project. So my knitting machine, my first garment, that counts as a special project. So I can't show you that in person because it's all not wrapped up. I put it in those vacuum bags so it's all the air sucked out. I cannot get to it. So hopefully there is a picture. That was a very stressful knit, but a very exciting one. I learned a lot about knitting machines because they are a steep learning curve. And although you might think they make your knitting go super fast, they cause a lot of other issues that you didn't know were possible. So I made a lot of mistakes with that t-shirt, but I still love that t-shirt. It's so happy. It makes me very happy to look at it and to wear it. So that one gets worn a lot. And then almost immediately I knitted up another Stripy Tee, also cotton, using some cotton that I had gifted to me from my mum via a friend, and some cotton that I purchased for, I think, a summer tee separately at some point, and then didn't use it. And then, oh yeah, I think I bought it to make the mangrove tee, and I've tried and failed twice, 3 times with that t-shirt. So I decided to use it in this Stripy Tee and also love it. Very similar style. Basically just two rectangles with some ribbing on the bottom. Okay, July. July was an exciting month for me because I had a few yarns that I've had in my stash for a couple of years. They're very special yarns, and I had some projects that I wanted to make, but they had so much stockinette, and it's not my favourite thing to do, but I don't know, I just procrastinate. When it comes to endless stockinette, I'd rather do an entire colourwork jumper or an entire lace jumper than do a jumper with stockinette. So I put these projects off. But once I got my knitting machine, I wanted to do all the fun stuff by hand and then the rest on the machine. So the first attempt was the Mount Pleasant tee. This was some beautiful hand-dyed yarn that came with the same surprise pack that I got this blue from. Also Keats garn. I made this tee. So I didn't have enough of this one to make the entire tee, so I used 2 different Keats garns yarns. I hand knit the lace on this one. Then I attached this to my knitting machine and whizzed all the way up to the top, and then I hand knitted the ribbing. So this one was a really quick knit. I love this hand-dyed yarn so much. I didn't own, to my memory, didn't own any hand-dyed yarn garments until I made this, and I actually love it a lot. Which is unfortunate really, because hand-dyed yarn is expensive and I love it so much. But alas, this was one of those yarns that I wanted to knit up because I was fed up of seeing it in a bag in my stash, unused, for 2 years. So now, not only did I get the joy of knitting it and the joy of using my knitting machine for it, I now have the joy of wearing it, and it never ever stops making me happy. It's so beautiful. So I love the Mount Pleasant tee. I love the lace. I think it's really beautiful. I do have another plan to make a jumper like this, hopefully this year. So that was the first. Then when I was on YouTube, I got one of those random, what are they called? Suggestions to say, you might be interested in this video. And it was a video from 11 or 12 years ago on a broomstick lace pattern. And when I saw this, I thought that looks super fun. I want to knit that, but what can I do with it? Then, since I just finished the Mount Pleasant tee, I thought I could make a tee. You may see a theme here, like this is the shape that I typically like, and what I'm wearing is very much the same. A lot of them have different, I just do different things on the arms, but the general style is one of my favorites. So what did I do? I just made 2 rectangles. So I did a little bit of the broomstick lace on the bottom. Don't think you can see it, but hopefully on the video where I'm talking about this you can see it. And I'm pretty sure I did a whole video on it, but yes, I love it. I love it, I love it. This is also hand-dyed. I bought this yarn from Fliegende Kiwi, I think it's called, a German dyer, and I bought this at a Wollenberlin summer wool festival, again 2 or 3 years ago, and it just sat there because it was intended to be a different t-shirt. I could not get my head around the lace pattern. I didn't really like the way it was written, and yeah, again, no joy. So scrapped that idea and turned it into something that brought me more joy, which it's not exactly my own design because I took this from a YouTube video and stuck it onto a rectangle. So it's kind of my own design, but not. Love this. And yes, I hand knitted the lace and then added it to my knitting machine and did the stockinette on the knitting machine. Then I was on a roll here, knitting through yarns that I wanted to knit out that had been sitting in my stash for years. So I picked up the Knitting for Olive silk, pure silk, and thought I'm going to make a vintage top, and I planned it with my friend to knit, like do a knit along on our knitting machines. She lives in the UK, I live here obviously, and we decided to knit it together. It didn't go quite to plan because I ended up getting further ahead than she was because she had work stuff. Then when mine went wrong, so she got ahead, and then I adjusted mine, and then she ended up struggling with the sleeves. So hers has never been finished. So it's technically, it's a good thing I didn't wait. I ended up turning mine into, are you ready? Shockingly, another tee. So this is a lace 1940s jumper that I turned into a tee. Since I got this yarn, I have discovered I don't really like yellow on my face, like next to my face, and I'd always wanted this colour, and when I got it I was very, very happy. I got it in a yarn swap, but now that I actually own it, I don't think it's like the best colour on me, but hey ho. This caused me a lot of drama because the silk is very drapey, and so when I was doing a gauge swatch, it would say, I can't remember now, but let's say 8 stitches in 10 centimeters, no, 8 stitches in 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch. It would say 8, 9, 10, 7, 7.5. So it was really hard to get a gauge that was going to fit. Then when I got to the lace, this came out so wide, and the sleeves were enormous. And I know from looking at people's pictures on Ravelry that have used this vintage knitting pattern, their sleeves were huge, and there's so much fabric up here. So I took out a few repeats, and it was still enormous, and I really did not like what I had created. So that is why I turned it into a tee, and I wear this way more. I would not have worn the other one. I have plans to make that the jumper again, using actual wool and not silk, and to completely adjust the entire top of the pattern so that it would look better on me. But I do love it. I love this lace detail, and I would like to make the jumper maybe this year, but it does depend. Like, for a fail, it turned out very well. So I did also discover that this silk feels so good. It's really nice in the summer because I talk about sweat a lot, you may have noticed. When you wear a cotton dress or a cotton tee and you sweat, and then you move your arm and the wind is there, it's all cold and bleh. But this somehow just stays body temperature. You don't sweat the same, and it doesn't, I don't know how to explain this. So far I've just sounded gross, but it's very nice for human bodies in the summer. There we go. So I managed to knit out 3 tees from stash that I had wanted to use for ages, so I was very happy about that. Okay, we're at 19% of battery, so I will do a little bit more and then take a break. So the last thing I knitted up was a pair of socks on my knitting machine because I was trying to figure out how to knit socks flat. That's the yarn I used. This was a failed pair of socks. I made them massive, so my mum took them home and unravelled them for me so I wouldn't have to look at the yarn and all the work I'd done seaming them just to find out they didn't fit. I still haven't managed to get machine knit socks to look nice, or in a... I don't enjoy what they look like. I don't enjoy the seaming or the edges. I really want to find a way to make them just for the authenticity, and that's how people often made them back in the 40s, and I just find that interesting. But I probably should not use soft striping yarn, and should probably, I think by now my seaming has improved, but basically they weren't the pair I made were a success. I have worn them, but I don't love them, and I want to make a pair I love, so we're working on it. That was July. August, I finished my Twinset, and that included this cardigan, which looks better on than it does off. And this is the Twinset suggested. The Twinset is a t-shirt and this cardigan, but since I'd already made a tee using the same yarn with stripes just like the pattern, I count this as the Twinset, because I didn't see the point in making an identical t-shirt that just had sleeves when I didn't need one. So that's how this came to be the Twinset. This cardigan I knitted on the knitting machine, but in hindsight it was a difficult one to make on the machine because it involves a lot of technical things that I ended up not doing because I couldn't figure out how to do it on the machine. This button band is not as it was supposed to be. Technically, this is correct, but you are supposed to then fold it in, and you would have made buttonholes twice. So you had to do one here and then one here, and then when you folded them, they met, and then I think you seamed it along. But I couldn't figure out how to do buttonholes on my machine at that moment, and let alone two of them, and then to somehow attach them. So that all went a bit wrong. But in the end, I don't actually mind because I don't do it up. But should I make this again, I would have to do it by hand because, yeah, I did not understand what I was supposed to do with that button band. The pockets, they're fake pockets, and as this was, my knitting machine was new to me and I wanted to learn new things, so there are things about this that could have looked different or turned out better, but I was using all of these as a learning experience. So technically they could have been knitted by hand, the ribbing, and it wouldn't have made them so cute and small, but I was learning how to do mock rib on my machine, so that's how that looks like that and not just a rectangular ribbing. It's mock ribbing, so it's gone cute and small. Again, I don't mind, but if you look at the original pattern, it isn't pulled in like that. I know I struggled a lot with sleeve heads, but this cardigan helped me learn a lot about sleeve construction and how many rows to do in order to get the fit correct. So even though it caused me a lot of stress, it gave me an excellent life lesson, so very happy about that. Love this colour. This is woolly knit yarn on a cone, the British Breeds yarn, and I think it's called Amber Blaze? No, it's not. I don't know what it's called. Amber Blaze was something else. It's this colour. I think there's only one of these colours. It's very nice. It's quite scratchy, but it is very nice. And I made the sleeves too small because I put the wrong tension. Let's pretend it was on tension 6 and I did this whole thing on tension 5 and it seamed. So you have to take that into account, and so I made it quite small. I have been stretching it, and I steamed it and stretched it, and on my last video I was telling you that I haven't worn it since I made it, which made me very sad. So for the whole week I've been wearing this cardigan with 3 different dresses, and I feel much better about myself now because I was feeling quite guilty that I had made this, gone to the effort and then never wore it. So now it has had at least a week's worth of wear, and this shall continue. And yeah, it's a gorgeous colour. I am going to stop talking now because the battery has run out, and I will pick up again for the rest of August. See you in a bit. Hello, welcome back. It's been about 2 hours. My battery did not charge in that like good hour because I forgot to plug it in. So let us continue. I've only got 50% battery, so let's see how far we get. Right, I was at August, so I can only show you one half of this because the other half is in a bag ready to be dismantled. But I made a 1930s bikini, and the shorts are the most successful part of the process. I love these. Are they flattering? Absolutely not. Are they amazing? Yes. I made these on my knitting machine, and since making these I've discovered I was making so many mistakes on my machine that I don't know how I even managed to get these to all come out the right direction, because they involved a lot of different shaping for the parts. It looks simple, but it involved a lot of decreases and shaping and the crotch and on 4 pieces and getting the ribbing to fit, and I made so many mistakes, mostly on the increases and decreases. I had no idea how to do them. I thought I did, but then since making this I've improved, and I'm kind of tempted to make these again, not striped, just plain, to wear under clothing in the winter. Just out of curiosity, if the whole process would go easier. But I found this knitting pattern on a website, and I had to request permission to have access to the pattern, and I don't remember how long it was, but a few weeks maybe later I got permission, and I had no idea what it was for, and then I clicked into it and saw what it was, and it's very cool. The bikini part didn't go so well. I can't really decide if it's because I didn't understand the pattern or if it's because I was trying to reinterpret the pattern into a machine knit pattern, and obviously I was new to doing that, so that just took on an extra level of challenge that didn't go that well. I did make the general shape, but because I wasn't very happy with it, I didn't spend a lot. Let me rephrase that. I wasn't particularly happy with how it was looking, and instead of just hand knitting the ribbing, I did it on the machine like this. This is a mock rib, so it's a double layer of fabric. And I thought it looked really nice on the shorts. I did it for the top and for the bottom, so I thought it might look weird if I didn't do it on the bikini top. But to be honest, it probably would have worked out better if I just picked up the stitches and knitted the rib. But I kind of knew already that I was going to rip it out, so I didn't want to spend the time to do it. But I have decided, in order to rescue this, I'm going to order 1 or 2 more skeins of these colours, and I'm going to make a it's either late 40s or early 50s top. I believe it's a Stitchcraft magazine, and it's like a halter neck style top to go with this, so I have a matching set for summer, although technically I can also wear it as undergarments in the winter. I have recently worn these under my skirts in the winter to keep my legs nice and toasty. Well, thighs and bum really. It doesn't exactly cover my legs. So this was a half success story. It was very intense trying to figure out the pattern. It was a pattern that was a little bit like knit front left as you did back right, but do half the instructions from back left and mix with front right, and you were just looking up, down, over here, over there, and it was very confusing. I don't remember there being a schematic or any evidence of how big or small it was going to be. It was stressful. If you want to watch, I have a whole video about it, but I will be coming back to the bikini top, and maybe in the future when I have more experience with 30s patterns, I might try doing the bikini top again out of interest to see how my skills have progressed, but for now it's in a bag ready to be ripped out. That brings us to September. September I ordered some yarn for my mum's jumper. I can't show you that in person because she has it and she does not live here. So there will be a picture or a video or some kind here. This jumper is technically a success because she loves it, but for me, I just wish I had made the neckline smaller, because when she's wearing it, you can see her t-shirt and it comes down like this, and it's so wide, and I want to get in there with elastic and crochet hooks and bring it all in, but that'll have to wait until another time. But she's happy with it. That's the main thing, I suppose. That was the Oh My Dear jumper. It was her Christmas present that I made in August and finished in September because she was visiting at the end of September. Or was it the middle? She was visiting in September and I had to have it ready. I got the yarn in August and I knitted it out by September. It was a thicker yarn. I knitted the yoke by hand. I already need tea, hang on. I'm afraid I'm going to have to speed up because my voice is going as per usual. Anywho, I knitted the yoke by hand, a lot of the time on the beach, which was interesting. 30+ degrees, me knitting a super thick warm alpaca jumper. Wearing my bikini, I should say. I wonder if there's a picture. I will try and add one. That one, I knitted the body and the sleeves on my knitting machine. Just for fun, just out of interest. I wanted to see how... My machine is a fine gauge machine, and I was curious at what point does the yarn become too thick for the machine. I have since discovered there is a limit, but this yarn was okay. It's technically a DK weight yarn, but because it's so fluffy, it worked out. There are so many interruptions in this one video. So, where was I? I knitted the yoke by hand, then I knitted the jumper. Yes, it was a DK weight yarn, but because the yarn is so fluffy, it works up more like a worsted. And I did not want to knit the entire jumper of stockinette in the round, basically. I didn't want to do it, and I have my machine and I wanted to play with it and I wanted to try out, see its limits. So that's what happened. I got to knit the fun part with all the colourwork by hand and then to get all the boring stockinette done on the machine. And I'm pretty sure I knitted the rib by hand. Then I also made my mum some socks from the 1940s. These are not them, although they are the same pattern. Her ones were grey and I knitted them on my knitting machine because I was trying to learn how to do different styles of flat socks on the machine, because my machine is a flatbed. You cannot knit in the round, just in case you didn't know. So these are the socks, but I made these ones for me. Her ones are grey with the blue, and mine are blue with, not the same grey actually, with the white. These are very fun. I really enjoy these. You start off knitting this rib, then you knit the colourwork, then you flip them inside out and knit the rest of the foot. So then you fold them over. I believe they're called bobby socks. I really, really love them. The only thing I discovered was that I don't have any shoes to wear them outside the house in. So I wore them around the house in my slippers, but then when I went to go out, if I put my boots on, you can't see them. They don't really work with trainers, and I have Birkenstocks and Birkenstock boots, so there is a gap in the shoe department as to how I can actually wear these. I know they would look nice with certain shoes like Oxfords, but I don't own Oxfords. So for now they're wearing at home socks. But they're very cool. I found this pattern with my mum when we were in a charity shop, no, antique shop in the UK. It was in a bundle of patterns and it comes with mittens. The pattern was mittens and socks. So I'd quite like to try the mittens as well. These were September, although these ones are actually mine that I knitted out in October. Continuing on, September I also finished my first knitted skirt on the machine. This is one of my favourite makes and one of my favourite machine makes. The yarn is woolly knit. I bought it on a cone in 2020 and I never knew what to do with it. I'm sure I had plans at the time, but I was new to knitting and just very excited about cones and yarns and colours, and this is such an amazing colour, but it's not typically a colour I would wear now, like in the last 2 years or so. So I made the skirt and then had no idea what to wear it with because it's orange, so if you wear black you look like Halloween, and everything else was pink or in different colours, so it didn't really work. So it has been a bit challenging to get, sorry, there are bits of fluff on it and I'm picking it off. Been a bit challenging to find clothing to go with it, but I think I've managed because creams and off-whites and grey whites go very nicely, and green. So this took quite a long time, definitely not as long as if I had done it by hand. Let me just put my phone on silent. The gauge is tiny. Don't know if that works. I always try, but I know that this camera doesn't pick up things too close. The gauge is really, really tight, so it would not be fun to knit this by hand, but I discovered a few issues, but I was able to get around them. My gauge seemed to go a bit off course. I don't know really what happened. You'll have to watch the video when I talked about it because I can't really remember, but it did just involve me having to add 1 or 2 extra panels and changing the final stitch count. If I was to knit this again, I would knit it slightly differently and not make the hem from the beginning. Each panel you started with this hem and then folded it and then knitted up, but it just means that there's a lot of bulk in the seams, which isn't so fun. So if I knitted it again, I would knit it all flat and then fold over the hem just like I would do if I was sewing. I don't know why that didn't occur to me at the time. I think I was just excited to follow the pattern as is. This pattern is a sunray skirt and it came in the English Knitax magazine. Yes, Knitax is the name of my knitting machine. I have a Swedish manual, an English manual and a German manual. And this one I found originally in the English, but it is actually also in the German. And there are plans in the making for this year that involve the German version. And that is all I will say. This came with me to Sweden and it was a lifesaver because it's so toasty warm. it didn't really occur to me when I was choosing the yarn that the skirt could get a weird shape or get very felted or bobbly. I didn't think about that, but then when I made it, a few people asked me that question, and I then thought about it, and I can say this yarn is fantastic. It hasn't pilled, it hasn't got all saggy and weird. It's a really good gauge, so it's drapey but still like firm and tightly knit, so it's good at keeping the wind and the rain off. And yeah, it hasn't pilled or done anything weird, so excellent yarn choice for skirts. Depending on your gauge, I'm sure if you maybe did it at a looser gauge, that might not be the same story. Okay, October, I knitted those socks I just showed you. I knitted felted seats. That is when I discovered the limits of my knitting machine. That yarn is, I think, 70 meters per 50 grams, I think, and my machine absolutely hated that wool, so don't recommend. The annoying thing is that I had this Drops Alaska in my yarn stash for ages and I didn't know what to do with it. I finally knitted it out, turned it into these felted seat covers, or seats, so that when we go to the forest or somewhere, if the floor is a bit damp, we can sit on them. I made one for me and one for my husband, and as soon as I finished them, I discovered that that's the exact yarn I needed to make some felted slippers, which is what I really wanted to make for Christmas. I wanted to make my family these slippers, but I cast on one and I got so bored very quickly, so it's actually abandoned, and I do really need to reunite myself with those slippers. I'm sure they won't be that tedious once I get into them, but it did mean I had to buy the Drops Alaska yarn again, even though I'd had it in my stash for 3 years. Anyway, here is a deja vu. We have another Mount Pleasant tee. This one has also been folded, so there's lots of creases. This one was a very happy make because I purchased this yarn from a knitter that I follow on Instagram who has her own sheep, and she had this yarn, this wool spun up into wool, into purchasable wool, and I bought it. Let me start this sentence again. She has sheep, they have wool. She turned the wool into knittable wool. I purchased said wool, and then I tried to make a vintage jumper with it, and it did not work because this wool is quite bouncy and springy, and the other yarn I tried to pair it with, they did not get on. So I had to rip it out, and the yarn has been sitting there. Everything has been sitting there for a couple of years because I bought it and then never got round to using it. So this year, no, last year was the year of using all those beautiful yarns and turning them into beautiful things that I would wear. So I made this Mount Pleasant tee using yarn from a knitter's cottage, and it's beautiful. I adore this yarn and I adore this garment. I made this to go with my skirt because when I was going to Sweden I had nothing that I could wear on the top to go with the skirt at all. So this I knitted in a couple of days because I had the help of my knitting machine. So I knitted this part by hand. I knitted all the plain stockinette on the machine. Then I carried it with me to Sweden, and in the car and on the ferry and in various places I seamed it together with the crochet method, I think, and I knitted the rib and the neckband and the other rib. So very happy purchase, very happy finished product. That makes no sense. I am very happy with the finished product. And I would really love to make a long sleeved jumper using this pattern. Okay, Okay, we're closing in. So I made, I'm not sure in which order, I decided to make some headbands. I'm still unsure how I feel about them. I always want to make something that's going to cover my ears, because if I get cold ears I get a headache. But I don't always want to have a hat because it smushes down my hair, and if I have a ponytail then the hat doesn't really fit on it. So I just wanted an alternative. So I made this headband. I won't put it on because it'll get all stuck in everything. But again, I did do a video so you can have a look at it there. This was just a way to try and use some of the yarn I have and make this knot. I don't know what you would call it, but I've seen other patterns using this and I think they look nice. But for some reason I just don't think this one looks that great. It's not my favourite thing I've ever made, but I'm glad I tried, and I have worn it multiple times. It's just, yeah, not the best thing I've ever made. And then I made an accidental headband because I was trying out on my machine there's a way to do colour work, and it is quite tedious and quite complicated, and it took me a very long time to figure it out, but I did eventually get my head around it, and I wanted to make a pair of socks flat. But it didn't quite work out because the gauge that I had when it was just plain knitting was very different to it being stock colour work. So I ended up turning it into a headband. It isn't my style, I'll admit that, but it was more of an experiment. It was more of learning how to use my knitting machine and make colour work. It was learning how to transform something into something else that was still usable, and I think I succeeded. So it's the Batty socks from Stone Knits, but in headband form. And it was supposed to be the second size, I think, and yeah, it came out really large. So I ended up knitting extra ribbing so that it was stretchy enough to go over my head. So I did wear it around Halloween. It's one of those things I will wear like 5 times a year, but maybe eventually I'll meet somebody that loves it and wants to wear it more often, then they can have it. But it was fun and a successful saviour. I saved it, I believe. More tea. Okay, November was an interesting one because I had lots of plans for other things, and then they went a bit wrong. I had intended to make my husband a jumper, and when the yarn arrived I did not like the colour at all. Then I discovered that the yarn was alpaca. I knew it was alpaca, but I didn't realise that the alpaca would behave so completely differently to wool, because the alpaca I'd used in the past had not. But in hindsight, there was wool and or nylon involved in those, so that is why. I tried to make this jumper. There's 4 gigs of footage of me trying to make and fix, repair, rip out, redo, resew this jumper. In the end, I got so upset and so annoyed that I pulled it apart, decided to make it into a dress. Dress did not work. You'll have to see the video for that one. So then I turned it into multiple things. There are so many ends sticking out. I am not a good end cutter offer. So I ended up turning it into a tee. This I did on my knitting machine using a Swedish pattern book. I don't remember if it was a modern pattern book or the vintage pattern book, but I have a few from Sweden, and I just plucked out some various patterns and stuck them together, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. The yarn is Drops Alpaca, I think. Don't love the colour, but I do love this so I forgive it. And this is how I saved the jumper. The skirt portion was just so unattractive, so awful, but I decided to keep the skirt part, turn it into a more easy to move skirt. And this is my underskirt, so I wear this under my dresses, under my skirts in the winter to keep my legs and my bum warm. So recently I've been wearing my bikini bottoms, then this over top, and then a skirt and or a dress. So despite the rage, this has actually been worn pretty much every day since November, so 2 months. And the other part of it I turned into a cowl, but I've never worn that because I tried to dye it. It did not succeed. For some reason the avocado did not turn it pink, even though I've had success with avocado in the past. So I still need to rinse that out to get the final weird pink stripy, like it sort of made it all blotchy but not pink. So I just need to rinse that again, then I can just wear it as a cowl. But I have nicer scarves, so I just tend to wear those and not ever think about that cowl. But I will think about it. But alas, that is part of what I made. I also made a baby bonnet, which you can't see, but I followed a pattern from Novita, I think. It was a really nice pattern. I'd quite like to make that bonnet for myself. And that was it for November. Nope, I'm lying. That was not it. I made myself a jumper and another bonnet. This is the bonnet. If you watched my Vlogmas, this was, I think, the first one, or it could be the second episode maybe. Anyway, this was in my Craftmas video. It looks really nice in person. The colours are really beautiful, but whenever I look at it on this screen or holding it up or pretty much anything that's not in real life, it looks really weird, but it is very nice in real life, the colour. This is technically a 1940s hood, and I have the original pattern, but Susan Crawford also made a pattern, and it's Colourwork all over. But I wanted to do a practice to see A, if I liked it, and B, what the fit was like. Have decided I don't think this is the style of hood or bonnet that I prefer. I prefer the one like my Swedish one that goes around, but that was the point of making it, so I do know that now. There are several things I changed, but I have worn this quite a lot and it does keep my head nice and warm. So yeah, have a look at my Craftmas video if you want to know more about that one. And there are so many ends I need to cut out of this jumper. They are everywhere. So just ignore those. This was also part of my Craftmas. This is a 1940s Swedish inspired vintage jumper. I had several things I wanted to do with this. I wanted to use this wool. It's the BC Garn Similar Melange. In hindsight, this is not an excellent choice of yarn for a vintage jumper because it's very thick, very dense, and it doesn't work that great with mock rib because it's very, very thick. But it is very nice, like it feels very nice, and it's very warm. It's just quite sturdy. And the wool itself, although I believe it's a fingering weight yarn, it does recommend to use 4 to 5 millimeter needles. And so I'm knitting this at a much tighter gauge. So it does cause a few issues when I sit, that this fabric sort of folds like that. But it's okay. I've just learnt to have peace with this. This is a Swedish pattern I found in a book from, I think, 1945. Not 100% sure, but I think it is. I took that pattern because I thought it was adorable and added it to this design. This is kind of a made up design. I didn't follow any pattern, I just used what I'd learned from my previous vintage knitting patterns. And I did have to rip it out because this was too close to the colourwork here and it just sort of sucked it in. And I think if I was to make this again or something similar, I would start this section just a bit lower, like there, just so that it wasn't all up at the top. And I was going to knit this by hand, but when I got to it, the temptation to try out the knitting machine again and the colourwork took over, and I did that. It isn't the easiest thing to do colourwork on my machine because it drops the stitches all the time. So several of these green stitches dropped and I had to fix them and sew them in duplicate stitch. It probably would have been faster to knit it by hand, but that was not the point of the exercise. I wanted to try it. So very happy with this one. We're at 18% battery. Gotta hurry up. Also, my husband wants lunch and I don't want him in the kitchen when I'm recording because it's too loud. So I think I just have 3 more to go. Okay, these next two are two I'm very proud of. This was also in my Craftmas. This is my Moomin Christmas jumper. And I'm so pleased with this. This I originally found, it's a sock pattern, and I found it on Ravelry and it's in Finnish and I wanted just the chart. So I took the chart and then added it to a vintage, like the same thing. I just used my body measurements and my gauge and turned it into a vintage-ish style jumper, but using the Finnish Moomin pattern. And I'm really, really, really pleased. Again, whole video on it if you want to know more. The yarn is absolutely beautiful. This is again Campus 2-ply. Possibly one of my, yeah, definitely one of my favourite yarns. Possibly my favourite. Let's not commit to that. But I'm very happy with this one. And it was finished in time for Christmas, so yay! Next one is my husband's jumper. And this will not fit on the screen, but I will try and put a picture of him wearing it. This one was such a success in multiple ways because I've been trying to make him a jumper for so long and failing, and in the end, after all the cursing and swearing and rage, I decided to just use my brain. I took his body measurements, I took a jumper that fits him, I took the measurements from that, I used my gauge, I learnt from different things that have gone wrong with his previous jumpers about how high the neck should be, how wide his shoulders are. I learnt a new measurement that I had not previously known about, and that I think has been key to getting the fit. The measurement goes from like here, round the back to here, and I believe his was 17 inches and mine are 13 inches. That completely changed how I was able to calculate the gauge and the measurements and when to bind off for the neck and when to, like, how wide basically to make this. So I didn't use a pattern, I used my brain, and I'm very happy. And he wore it every single day since I gave it to him, and that makes me very, very, very happy. I have since steamed it, and I wanted to update because a couple of people did ask after I said I don't know if it's going to stretch or if it's going to bobble or what it's going to do, because it's superwash yarn and I don't typically make garments in that, so I didn't know what it was going to do, and I can inform it hasn't stretched, at least yet, but it did get very, very bobbly, especially around his hips, where I'm assuming it's where the jacket goes, or maybe where it rubs on the belt, or perhaps where he sits on his chair. So I did shave that, and now it's all fine again. So, success story. Sorry for being so quick, it's just, yeah, time, voice, battery. This one I have not shown on the channel at all, but I have finished my final knit of the year, and this hot cocoa. These are the hot cocoa socks from Stone Knits. My lovely friend Anne sent me the pattern when I mentioned these, and thank you very much. I'm so happy. The yarn my mum gave me, and I wanted to make them into like the craziest socks. Definitely happened. They are mad, very festive. This is the Yule or Yuletide? I think Yuletide from West Yorkshire Spinners. Then the beige is from Arvetta Vilcalana, as are these, I believe. I started off doing the hot cocoa with the snowflakes, but 3 colours in a row. I hated it. I hated it so much. My candy canes were 3 colours in a row, and this, so I ended up duplicate stitching afterwards on some of them, and it looks terrible. The candy canes, like, some are really fat and some are thinner, and I think it might have been easier to have done it all with 3 colours in a row rather than duplicate stitching, but alas, it's done now. But after I did this one, I decided there are 2 charts in the pattern, and this one has a smiley face, so I went with that one. I still had to do the candy canes duplicate stitch, but this at least was more pleasant to knit. And I did make a mistake, because the last Colourwork socks that I made for my mum, and I think the notes that I took were my mum's socks, so that was I went up to 2.75mm needles and a higher stitch count, and I think with my socks I only need to go up to 2.5. I'm so close to finishing. If they were for me, which they were, I should have gone to 2.5mm and not 2.75mm. So they did come out quite big. They fit me, but they're just bigger than I would usually make them. But I'm very happy with them. They were my last final make that I finished on New Year's Eve, I think. Something like that. That is everything. My voice is going, so thank you to everybody that followed along last year, that have supported me, that have liked my videos and commented, and just in general, thank you very, very much for your support, and I look forward to having you all on board for my next adventure of the year and all the following adventures to come. So thank you very much, and Happy New Year again, and we will see you next time. Bye!